Ladies and gentlemen, when we think about Courage the Cowardly Dog, we think about kids watching a scared little pink dog in the middle of nowhere and getting traumatized every Tuesday. Well, let me tell you something. As trauma-inducing as it may be, Courage is probably the bravest character in cartoon history. I'm going to prove it using a German philosopher who looks like he's never laughed a day in his life. For those of you who don't know, Courage the Cowardly Dog ran from 1999 to 2002 on Cartoon Network, and if you watched it as a kid, I am genuinely sorry for what it did to your psyche. That show was responsible for more childhood trauma than all of the Hot Topic chains combined. And I'm talking about you 2000s edgy teenager who listened to Avril Lavigne and thought you were being a nonconformist. The setup is simple. There's a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. And nowhere is literally the name of it, by the way. In that farmhouse, we have an old couple. Muriel, who is kind, warm, and probably British. Then we have Eustace, who is grumpy and greedy and has never had a single positive thought in his life. And then we have Courage, a small pink dog who is terrified of everything and yet somehow saves the day every single episode. This pairing is literally the epitome of every old couple. I don't even care if it's my own grandparents or those two guys from Barnyard. Before we go in deeper to analyzing Courage, we need to talk about Martin Heidegger. Martin Heidegger is a 20th century German philosopher. He wrote one of the most important books in the history of philosophy called Being and Time. He was also a Nazi, which is a whole thing we're not getting into today, but it's important to acknowledge this before we go any further. We are separating the philosophy from the man, which is its own ethical question, but here we are. It's important because his philosophy is important. Heidegger's whole obsession was a question that sounds stupid when you first hear it. What does it mean to exist? Not be alive, don't get me wrong, but to exist. See, for Heidegger, there's a difference between existing and being alive. To be the kind of being that knows it exists, that can question itself, that can sit there at 3 a.m. asking what any of this is for. He had a word for this. He calls it Dasein. Literally translated, it means being there. Dasein is a being that exists and is aware of it. Rocks exist, plants exist, your couch exists, cats exist, but Dasein is something specific. Dasein is the kind of existence that has to reckon with itself, almost on a daily basis. But it's a fancy way of saying being a person is hella exhausting and other things don't have to deal with it except you. And here's where it starts to matter. Heidegger said Dasein always finds itself already in a situation it didn't choose. You didn't pick your parents, you didn't pick your country, you didn't pick your name. I mean, if you did, I hope you pick a cool name, but still, you didn't get to choose your language, the century you were born into, the random circumstances that shape everything about who you are. You just woke up one day, became aware of existing, and were already in the middle of it. Heidegger called this thrownness. Courage didn't choose nowhere. He didn't choose the farmhouse. He didn't choose to live with an old man who actively dislikes him. He didn't choose a reality where every supernatural horror in the cosmos seems to have his address. He just found himself already there, in the middle of it, with no exit and no explanation whatsoever.
Abandoned as a pup, he was found by Muriel, who lives in the middle of nowhere with her husband, Eustace Bay.
Guys, let me level with you. Nowhere isn't just a setting. For our case, it's an existential condition, and Courage is the only one in that house who feels it. Okay, so Courage is the only one who feels something. Cool. But what exactly does Courage feel? The easy answer here is cowardice and fear. Duh, like he's Courage the Cowardly Dog. The show is called Courage the Cowardly Dog Show. Case closed. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Alright guys, there's a difference between fear and anxiety, and it really matters. It's really important to distinguish these two. You see, fear has an object. You're scared of a monster under the bed. You're scared of the dark. I mean, maybe. You're scared of Eustace if you're Courage. Fear points at something specific, and in theory, if you remove that specific thing, the fear should go away naturally. Anxiety is different though. Anxiety doesn't have an object. Anxiety is necessarily a structureless dread that comes from confronting existence itself. The feeling that something is fundamentally wrong, not with any particular situation, but with being alive in the first place. You can't point at it, you can't fight it, you can't fix it by changing your environment. It still exists, it continues to exist. Heidegger thought anxiety was actually the most honest emotional response to existence and thrownness. Because existence really is uncertain. It really is finite. It really doesn't come with guaranteed meaning. Most people spend their entire lives running from this feeling. They stay busy, they make noise, they scroll, they fill every quiet moment with something so they never have to sit with the dread of existing. And then you have courage. Watch any episode and ask yourself, is courage afraid of the specific monster, or is there something underneath that never goes away, even after the monster is defeated? Because by episode 3, you'll realize the monsters are almost beside the point. Yeah, there is a monster. Yes, there is fear. But when you think about it, courage is preemptively scared of everything, before the monsters even show up. The horror in that show isn't really about whoever shows up that week. It's about the feeling underneath every episode that something is deeply, structurally, fundamentally wrong with the world. Especially the world that courage seems to live in, and nobody else seems to notice except courage. That's not a character flaw here. That's not Courage's weird little quirk where he seems to feel everything. That's the most accurate response to nowhere. Courage feels what everyone feels, but nobody talks about. The constant low hum of existential unease that comes with being alive in a world you didn't ask for and being alive in a world you can't fully understand. He just happens to be the only one in the house with the honesty to feel it. But just feeling the anxiety is never enough. And this is where people would give up and say Heidegger is depressing. Stay with me though, because it actually gets a lot better. Heidegger also has a concept called being toward death. The idea that we are always, at every moment, moving toward our own death. Not in a goth way.
They're all a bunch of Nazi conformist cheerleaders.
In an honest way, if we are to determine an absolute event that happens to existence, it's ceasing. It's death. It's the one thing that is completely non-negotiably yours. Nobody can die your death for you. You will die your own death. And Heidegger thought that actually confronting this, like really sitting with the fact that you are finite, that your time will run out, that you are going to end, is what makes you authentic, is what makes authentic existence possible. Because once you actually face that, the small stuff stops mattering. You stop performing, you stop chasing things you don't actually want. You start choosing what actually matters to you. And that is what makes you authentic. Realistically speaking, most of us never get there. We don't want to admit it, but we constantly distract ourselves our whole lives. We die having never have, for lack of a better word, genuinely confronted our own existence. People die as a slightly older version of who they were at 22, having simply just scrolled, consumed, and complied for 40, 50, 60, or however many years that they're alive. Now, through this lens, let's have a look at courage. Every single episode, this dog faces death. Directly, personally, with full awareness. A new monster, a new cosmic threat, a new situation where everything could end, and it probably should end. I mean, both objectively and subjectively. He is facing death. Like, the monsters are literally trying to kill him, and he literally thinks that the monsters are trying to kill him. Every single time, he's terrified, he shakes, he screams. Bro literally falls apart on the screen, and then he goes back in. To me, and probably to Heidegger, that's not cowardice anymore. That's what Heidegger calls being toward death. See, courage doesn't pretend death isn't coming. He feels it fully, every episode, in vivid color for that matter. That show has some great coloring, by the way. And he chooses to act out anyway, out of commitment to something that matters to him more than his own safety. I bet you Heidegger would call that the most authentic form of existence. In its own way, the name of the show isn't ironic. Courage, by necessarily being scared, is the only character in that farmhouse who is actually genuinely fully alive, authentically alive. The show isn't just about courage though. If courage is objectively existing correctly, what's happening with everyone else? Well, it might not surprise you that Heidegger has an answer for this too, and he calls it inauthenticity. The way most people avoid confronting their own existence by losing themselves in routine, in distraction, in what he calls das Man, literally translated, the day. You don't make choices, you just do what one does. You go along, you don't ask questions, you keep your head down and let the world tell you who to be and what to do. As much as I love the guy, Eustace, unfortunately, is inauthenticity in a hat and overalls. Look, he has never once confronted his own existence, okay? He's not even running from it, at least not actively and consciously. He's just so completely lost in inauthenticity that the moral question never even occurs to him. A supernatural horror manifests in his living room, and Eustace wants to know if it's worth any money, which is, by the way, capitalism. The cosmos is collapsing, and Eustace is annoyed about his chair. He distracts himself from his own anxiety with greed, with cruelty, and the same three phrases on rotation for 52 episodes. You know what they are.
Stupid dog! You made me look bad!
He grumbles, he watches TV, he takes up space. He's not evil. Oh no, my friends, Eustace is definitely not evil. Maybe at some point I'll do a video essay on Eustace and other misunderstood characters, but for now, Eustace is just inauthentic. He does what one would do. He has never asked himself a single existential question in his life, and he probably never will. Now, could that be because of thrownness? Could that be because there was never enough pre-existing social and material conditions to make him question mortality in the first place? Is he just a misunderstood old man who deserves our pity instead of hatred? Does he actually have any agency in how he treats courage, or is it all predetermined? You never know. Muriel is a harder nut to crack though. She seems at peace, she seems wise, she's warm and kind and unbothered. And on the surface, it looks like she's figured something out. But Heidegger would push back. Is Muriel authentically at peace, or is she just so lost in the game that the dread never even reaches her? Has she confronted her own thrownness? Has Muriel confronted anxiety? Her own being toward death? Or has she found such a warm corner of inauthenticity that she gets to bake pies while the universe collapses around her? It's an open question, honestly. Maybe she's enlightened to a level that we don't understand yet. Maybe she's just kind. The show doesn't tell us. What's clear though is the fact that courage doesn't have that luxury. He can't distract himself. The anxiety won't let him. Every episode forces him to confront exactly what Heidegger said most people spend their whole lives running away from. And he does it anyway. Every time. He confronts it. So here's what Courage the Cowardly Dog is actually about. It's not a show about a scared dog. It's a show about what authentic existence looks like when you strip away all the comfortable distractions we use to avoid it on a daily basis. Courage is thrown into nowhere without choosing it. He lives with a structureless anxiety that never fully goes away. He faces death every episode and keeps going forward anyway. And he does all of this not because he's not afraid. Oh, my friends, he's absolutely shitless. But because there's something that matters more to him than his own comfort. Muriel, love, the small, fragile life he was thrown into and somehow learned to care about. Heidegger would say that is the whole thing. That's authentic existence. Authentic existence isn't about being fearless. It's about feeling everything. The thrownness, the anxiety, the weight of being finite and existing, and choosing to act anyway, choosing what matters, choosing to be. The show is called Courage the Cowardly Dog, and the joke, if there is any jokes, is that he's the only one in that house who isn't a coward, who's actually living with anxiety and fear, but that makes him authentic. Eustace runs from existence into cruelty and denial. Muriel floats above it in warmth, whether intentionally or not. But Courage, shaking, screaming, completely terrified, walks back into the horror every single time. For love, for Muriel, for the only thing that actually matters to him in a world that never gave him the option to choose any of it. That's not cowardice, my friends. That's the only honest way to be alive. That's authenticity.